So, welcome to this fourth video of our course. Our theme, Going for Refuge. And the theme of this specific video, Going for Refuge and Rituals. But before going on to today's theme, let's have a recap of what we looked at the last video. It provides an important backdrop for what we'll be doing, what we'll be looking at today. In the last video, we were looking at levels of going for refuge. And we started with provisional going for refuge. This is our level when we just try it and see. We don't have to believe anything. We're not asked for blind faith. We just try and see. It's the same level as what can be called social or cultural going for refuge. For people who are born and grow up in Buddhist cultures, they may well consider themselves Buddhists, but don't make a serious effort to practice. So both of these examples of our first level. And then the second level, effective going for refuge. This is when our going for refuge reaches a level of intensity where we're able to commit to continuing going for refuge. We're able to make a commitment to go for refuge until the end of the path, until enlightenment, as long as we stay in good conditions. And this commitment to going for refuge finds expression in practicing a spiritual teaching given by a spiritual teacher. And if we do it with others, we're joining an effective spiritual community, an order. In Triratna, we mark this step with a ceremony, an ordination ceremony, an aspect of which is receiving a Buddhist name. Like my name, Suvannavira, and the Kesa, which is what I'm wearing around my neck. We become members of an order. No documents, no certificates. A purely spiritual body, connected by our effective going for refuge. The third level is a real going for refuge. This can be considered the pivotal point of the spiritual life, the pivotal point on a spiritual path, where we have our first real insight into the nature of reality. Not an intellectual understanding, but a direct experience, face to face with reality, which can be considered a turning about in the deepest seat of consciousness. We break the three fetters binding us to conditioned existence, the first three fetters of 10, and we can no longer fall away from the path. In a way, it just becomes a matter of time until enlightenment. In this life or one of the next ones. Sangharakshita said that stream entry should be the goal for all seriously practicing Buddhists. And it could be attainable in 5 years serious practice. And finally, the fourth level, we have absolute going for refuge. We reach the endless end, which is enlightenment. The content of our experience can't be expressed in words. However, we can say we become our own refuge. We perfect wisdom and compassion. We fulfill our highest potential and reach the pinnacle of the evolution of the individual. However, there's one more thing to say. All these 4 levels occur in a context, which can be called cosmic going for refuge. Cosmic going for refuge, where each being is trying to raise themselves to the next level of development and organization, to the next level of being and consciousness. And this process of cosmic going for refuge can be viewed as evolution. Evolution in 2 great stages. Firstly, the lower evolution, which is collective, where the group evolves. Examples of which are the evolution of a country, or a family, or a sports team even. And then secondly, the higher evolution, individual evolution, depending on the effort of the individual alone. So this is our context for what we'll look at in the video to come. So we've looked at quite a lot of detail at the levels of going for refuge in our little resume. And this is because one of them was of particular interest for the theme of this video. Our theme here is the place of ritual in spiritual practice. What is the connection between rituals and going for refuge? Even what rituals do we have in Triratna? And what's the place of mantras? But you may remember, we looked at real going for refuge, a level of particular importance in a spiritual life, the pivotal point, the pivotal moment even in spiritual life. When our going for refuge reaches this level of intensity, we enter the stream which leads to enlightenment. And we enter the stream by breaking 3 fetters. So what are these 3 fetters? Firstly, this fixed self-view. For example, I can't change. The second is doubt and indecision, the lack of commitment. And third, there's a fetter of dependence on rites and rituals as ends in themselves. So we have this fetter, dependence on rites and rituals, as ends in themselves. And yet, in Triratna, there's quite a lot of ritual. So let's have a bit more of a look at the connection between rituals and going for refuge, and especially rituals and real going for refuge. How to understand this? Is there a contradiction? Just to say at the beginning, since our theme is rituals, let's look at just rituals here, not rites. The better being dependence on rites and rituals. But we'll just look at rituals. And we'll start with the question, what does it mean to perform a ritual as an end in itself? A question for you to participate actively in this video, in this course. What do you think? Your answer is to this question. What does it mean to perform a ritual as an end in itself? Please write your answer in chat. So, what does a ritual done as an end in itself mean? It's done as an end in itself when it's enough to do it by itself. Sangharakshita said that rituals are ends in themselves when they are done without giving attention to the state of mind that we do it in. So a purely external act. Let's see a few examples. Firstly, Orthodox Hindus believe that they can purify themselves of sin by washing in the river Ganges in India, not only cleaning their body in the waters, but cleaning their soul by washing in the Ganges. Just washing, that's all. So a purely external action. No attention given to the state of mind. No need to work on your mental states. No need for any genuine spiritual striving. And we can bring this kind of attitude to ritual when we think it's simply enough to do the puja, to chant the mantras, without giving any attention to our mental state, to our state of mind in which we do them, without working on a state of mind in which we're in. It's like being the audience in a film, something passive, rather than being the actors in a play, actively participating. Another example of a purely external act, a little closer to home, metaphorically and literally, is with mantras when people can ask, how many do we need to chant? When they expect an exact number, 108, not 107 or 109. It reveals an attitude when it has to be 108. Maybe there's something magical about the number. And of course, this doesn't depend on us. It doesn't depend on the energy we put in, our striving to chant the mantra. This energy hardly varies if we do 108 or 107 or 109. So thirdly, another example, people say some mantras are very powerful, by themselves very powerful. Not the person chanting the mantras who is spiritually powerful, but the mantras themselves, independent of the person chanting them. So again, we're faced with something external, something separate from the person themselves, not dependent on the person themselves. So all three of these kinds of attitudes, washing in the river Ganges, an exact number of mantras, and looking for very powerful mantras, might really only strengthen the third fetter. What we mistakenly can think of as spiritual practice will only bind us to the world, to conditioned existence, to samsara, more tightly. And this is an extreme in our attitude to ritual, taking them as ends in themselves. The other attitude, as far as rituals goes, the other extreme, is denying their value altogether. Denying the value of rituals was something common in the Protestant Church. After the split with the Catholic Church, the Protestant Reformation, early in the 16th century, rituals came to be connected with degenerate Catholic priests. The absence of rituals came to be seen as something modern and progressive. Religion became more rational, and rituals were seen as superstition, something belonging to a lower form of human development. And of course, this concerns us in Russia. During the Soviet period of Russian history, there was also a rationalist worldview. Rituals, like religion as a whole, was considered something that belonged to an earlier stage of human development. We might still have a trace of the Soviet attitude in our worldview. The question for you: what do you think of the rational worldview? Do you have a trace of this Soviet attitude to rituals in your worldview? People might reveal this rational worldview when they say Buddhism is the most rational religion. Buddhism is the most rational religion, thinking they're paying it a compliment. Bhante Sangharakshita says if you look at the different schools of Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, Zen, the Theravada, all have a large ritual element. We can look at this psychologically. When we say rituals, give us access to deeper energies, to deeper emotions, energies and emotions that are usually subconscious, but get freed up when we do ritual. Incidentally, this also explains the importance of myth and legend in Buddhism. The life of the Buddha has factual aspects and mythic aspects. And these myths, these legends give access to deeper energies and deeper emotions, just like the arts, painting, sculpture, poetry, all of which play an important role in Buddhism. And this is important because intellectual understanding is not enough. Rational understanding is not enough. Intellectual understanding, rational understanding, of course, is important. But the intellect doesn't have enough energy behind it by itself. And we need a lot of energy to live the spiritual life, to overcome all the internal and external pulls and distractions. And to do this, to overcome them, we need to find and utilize these deeper subconscious energies and emotions, which rituals, myth, legend, and the arts help us to contact. How do you relate to myth and legend, to rituals, to the arts, painting, sculpture, poetry? How do you relate to folklore even? A question for you for our group chat in Telegram or WhatsApp. Looking forward to reading your replies. So, what are rituals when they are done as ends in themselves and not merely external observances? What are rituals when we take into account the state of mind with which we do them in? When we do them with spiritual striving? This is a complex question and deserves more than one answer. But the first attempt, the first wave, will be a definition of rituals coming from Erich Fromm, the 20th century German psychologist. A definition of rituals which Bhante Sangharakshita thought very highly of. Rituals are common action, expressive of common striving, and rooted in common values. I'll repeat that. Common action, expressive of common striving, and rooted in common values. So let's look at this definition, phrase by phrase. Firstly, we have common action. This implies that thoughts and feelings by themselves are not enough. We need to act. Our practice involves not only speech and mind, but body as well. Body, speech, and mind means our being as a whole. So we need ethical action. And we need ritual action. We can bow in front of the shrine. We can do prostrations. So not just something intellectual, not just something emotional or concerning our feelings. Our body takes part in a spiritual life as well. So when we perform a ritual, there's an action aspect to it. How we sit for meditation, joining up arms, which is done in common, which is done together. And when we all do this, it brings people together and creates a strong atmosphere, a unique atmosphere. And secondly, from Fromm's definition, common action expressing common striving. Striving means that it's something we do for ourselves. It's not something someone else does for us. So it's not something merely external, because we're not passive observers like the audience of a film, but something we're doing for ourselves, like the actors in a play. Each person has their part to play. A question for you to answer in our groups. How do you feel doing a ritual? Like the audience or an actor? And why? What's the difference? What's more, Bhante Sangharacharya says rituals are not for lazy people. You need certain qualities to perform a good ritual, to be a good ritualist. You need to be mindful and have an aesthetic sense. Rituals need to be beautiful, to be inspiring, and you need to understand the meaning. And a certain stamina just to keep sitting. Even holding our hands together can become tiring. Common striving has a wider meaning as well. Not only striving during the ritual itself, but people doing the ritual. If they're practicing together, if they're striving together on the path of practice, that will have an effect. You can't do a ritual with a random collection of people from the street. Not with any atmosphere, at least. You could only do a ritual within a spiritual community or sangha, where the ritual expresses brotherhood, solidarity, metta. But why is expression important? When we express something, when we express thoughts or feelings by action, by words and action, it's what Fromm calls symbolic expression. Something comes out from the depths, or perhaps the heights. And symbolic expression is different from intellectual expression. Symbolic expression is something from deeper levels of consciousness. So rituals can be seen as acting out a dramatized myth that we all take part in, a dramatization of reality even, and our striving to reality, to realize reality. But still, why is it necessary to bring all of this out from the depths? Psychologically speaking, when we do, what we express becomes an object. We can look at it, we can see it, know it, understand it. And in this way, we can start to include it in our conscious attitude. We can integrate it and let it enrich us and lessen the divide between conscious and unconscious. We can become it. And this becoming explains the rich atmosphere of pujas. A question for you. Do you have experience of integration, this sort of integration in pujas, in ritual? And lastly, the third aspect, the third phrase of Fromm's definition. Common action, rooted in common values. Ritual isn't only ritual. Ritual is taken from religious philosophy, a common teacher and a common teaching. The more developed the religion, we can say, the more developed the ritual. So there we have it, common action, expressive of common striving, rooted in common values. And question for you, for your honest thoughts. What do you think of ritual? What's your experience of ritual? And does it correspond to Fromm's definition? And if not, why not? Is anything missing? I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. So, is Fromm's definition enough to understand ritual? Well, you could say ritual can be seen as the development of faith, the development of Shraddha. We looked at faith in a second video. Faith being not belief, Shraddha not being translated as belief, because of the association of belief with blind belief. blind belief, being asked to believe something without any means of verification ourselves. In Buddhist teaching, there's no place for blind faith. Faith is balanced by wisdom. You need one, you need the other. And a balance is achieved by awareness. So faith balanced by wisdom, achieved by awareness. So what can we really have faith in? Well, we can have faith in something if it accords with three faculties, three qualities. Firstly, our personal experience. Secondly, reason. Thirdly, our intuition. So 2 out of 3 isn't enough. So we're told personal experience and reason isn't enough if it doesn't accord with our intuition. Reason and intuition isn't enough if it doesn't accord with our personal experience. Personal experience and intuition are not enough if they don't accord with our reason. So all 3 are needed, we're told, for us, for something to be worthy of our faith. And the relationship of faith to going for refuge, our main theme of going for refuge, or faith can be seen as the emotional aspect of going for refuge. So ritual as practice to develop faith. We saw how also on a spiral path to enlightenment. Faith arises in independence on dukkha. Dukkha being the open, honest awareness of the unsatisfactoriness of conditioned existence, meaning of our everyday lives, even if everything is fine now. Faith is faith in something more to life, something transcendental, something beyond. Faith is the residence of something unconditioned in us, which resonates with the unconditioned in the universe. Faith is our positive emotional response to the ideal of the perfection of wisdom and compassion, the ideal meaning the pinnacle of the evolution, the individual, faith in a state of Buddhahood, in enlightenment, in the transcendental, faith in the possibility of total transformation and to overcoming all our suffering. And faith as a positive emotional response to the ideal. So faith is an emotion. And perfect emotion, the perfection of our emotion, is the second step on the Noble Eightfold Path. That famous teaching. And Sangharakshita said that for most people, finding emotional equivalence to our intellectual understanding is a central task of our spiritual lives. I'll repeat that. Finding emotional equivalence to our intellectual understanding is a central task of our spiritual lives. So developing faith is an important practice. And puja and ritual mantras are an important part in that important practice. But how do we develop faith? This is an important question. And first of all, it's worth saying that faith can be developed, just as metta can be developed, just as our muscles can be developed if we go to the gym and train with practice and repetition. Our muscles can be developed, our metta can be developed, our faith can be developed. And how can we develop our faith? A few ideas, not a comprehensive list, but a few ideas. Our faith can be developed by contact with those on a spiritual path, with spiritually mature beings. Personally, maybe, if we're lucky enough, through books, reading about the teaching and lives of teachers, in art, pictures of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, poems, statues in museums, videos on YouTube, and also through expressing our admiration. Faith can be developed by singing the praises of the spiritually mature in pujas, through mantras and other rituals. So the practice of puja, translated as worship, and other rituals, other mantras, are ways to develop shraddha, to develop faith, amongst other qualities. That is our means of developing faith. What's your experience of developing faith? Or faith in people, Buddhist or non-Buddhist, maybe that arose spontaneously? Please share in our chat online. So, what rituals do we do in Triratna, in the Triratna Buddhist Community? Well, first of all, there's the refuges and precepts. We've already looked at this one, the most widespread ritual in the Buddhist world. Just one thing I'll mention here. People sometimes ask, when can I go for refuge? Or realistically, what they really say most often is, when can I take refuge? Having explained why Sangharakshita chose going for refuge, a more literal translation over taking refuge, the dynamic character of going for refuge. And he taught as well that we don't just go for refuge once and for all. One ritual, say it, and it's done. No, it's not like that. Internally, we're looking to deepen our going for refuge all the time, hopefully every minute of every day. Externally, we can express our going for refuge by chanting the refuges and precepts on our own even, or at the start of a class maybe, it being an example of common action, expressive of common striving, rooted in common values, and a way to develop faith. So when can we go for refuge? Right here and right now. But moving onwards, secondly, there's the threefold puja, sometimes also called, well, maybe it isn't, the threefold puja, familiar to some of us. A puja rejoicing in the merits of the Buddha and all the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, culminating with the three traditional offerings of flowers, candles, and incense. The threefold puja can include the refuges and precepts and mantras. I'll say a bit more about mantras soon. And thirdly, the sevenfold puja, a longer puja. We're less familiar with it in Russian. 7 verses, 7 parts taken from the verses of the Bodhicharya Avatara. Those beautiful verses for the development of the bodhicitta, the will to enlightenment for the sake of all, the intention of the bodhisattva, the altruistic dimension of going for refuge. The Bodhicharya Avatara, composed by the 9th century Indian poet sage Shantideva, and selected verses arranged in 7 stages, expressing deepening spiritual moods. And we can include in it the refuges and precepts, mantras, the reading of an inspirational text, and Heart Sutra, the heart of Buddhist wisdom. So the sevenfold puja. And fourthly, the Triratna Vandana, the text usually chanted in Pali, found in the Pali canon, often repeated in the Pali canon, worshipping the three jewels, rejoicing in the qualities, remembering the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Fifthly, one more popular ritual is the dedication ceremony in our own language to start a retreat or dedicate a new Buddhist center. And sixthly, the Dhammapalangata, sometimes known as the last Vandana, verses that protect the truth. Again in Pali, verses taken from the Dhammapada, sung beautifully to a particular tune. And chanted and sung at the end of a retreat, the very last event of the retreat, or an evening or a day's practice. We can listen to it at the end of this video. So there you have it. A few of the most popular rituals in Triratna for the development of faith. And now I'll just say a few words about mantras before the last Vandana. Mantras are very popular in Russia. Our websites, buddhiana.ru, buddhismtriratna.ru, and Russian Wild Mind seem to have more visitors from people inquiring about mantras than anything else. Of course, mantras have their roots in Hinduism, and they were incorporated into Buddhism at a later stage in its development. And it became an important part of Tibetan Buddhism. You might already know quite a lot about mantras from various sources. They have a specific significance in Triratna. So, to be receptive to that specific significance, I'm asking you to come with beginner's mind, asking you to start afresh. In Mahayana and Vajrayana Buddhism, there are many Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. They represent aspects of the enlightened mind, qualities of the enlightened mind. For example, there's the red Buddha, Amitabha, who represents infinite light, infinite love. And these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have visual images. We can see an image now of Amitabha. So yes, our image of Amitabha Buddha, the red Buddha, infinite light, infinite love. But as well as visual images, they have oral images, oral symbols. And these oral symbols are what mantras are. So you can't really understand a mantra very deeply without having some understanding of the qualities of the enlightened mind. And by chanting the mantras, you can get a deeper experience of these enlightened qualities, which the Buddha or Bodhisattva represents or communicates. You can also get a deeper sense of these qualities through their visual images. In fact, you can do both, coming at the enlightened mind from two directions at once, the oral symbols and the visual symbols. Yes, we do this as a meditation practice. It's called sadhana, which is very popular in Tibetan Buddhism. In Triratna, receiving a sadhana is part of our ordination ceremony, a very significant ritual that represents spiritual rebirth, something new coming into our consciousness. So all of this is the essence of the meaning of mantras. But there's more we can say about mantras. Bhante Sangharakshita taught that there are 5 more qualities that we can learn from to know what mantras are. Firstly, they're a string of symbols, of syllables, a string of syllables in Sanskrit. Sometimes they're words, but we don't need to get too technical about them. It's the quality of the enlightened mind that's the most important thing that they communicate. And secondly, the Sanskrit symbols themselves can't really be translated, even if they have words in their meaning. The meaning of the mantra is much greater than the words themselves. Thirdly, the mantras are the names of the Buddhas or Bodhisattvas. And when we chant the mantras, they come. When we chant the mantras, we call the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, and they come. Fourthly, for a mantra really to be such, it's given by the Guru at times of initiation. For us in Triratna, it's given by the preceptor during the time of our ordination ceremonies. And fifthly, mantras need to be repeated. They need to be practiced, developed. We need to train in them like muscles need training and practice. Otherwise, the energy that we receive from them will eventually be lost. A question for you to answer in chat, feel about them. Are they an important part of your practice? So there you have it. Rituals and mantras in Triratna. The relationship of rituals and mantras to going for refuge. Rituals and mantras as an expression of going for refuge. And how to avoid them, the rituals and mantras. Simply being a way of how to avoid them, simply being a way of strengthening the third fetter. By understanding the internal aspect of practice. Fundamentally being aware of the state of mind in which we do them. As a means of transforming our state of mind through our active participation, through our spiritual striving, and its external expressions in the rituals of the Sangha on the path to enlightenment. So to finish, let's go back and listen to the Dhammapalagata, the last Vandana, the verses that protect the truth. So we'll finish with the Dhammapalagata in Pali, the verses that protect the truth. But before we listen to it in Pali, I'll just say the verses in English so we know what's being said, what's being expressed. So the Dhammapalagata, not to do evil. to cultivate the good, to purify the mind. This is the teaching of the Buddhas. Lead a righteous life, not one that is corrupt. The righteous live happily, both in this world and the next. He is not versed in Dharma, who merely speaks much. He who hears but a little of the teaching, but sees the truth and observes it well. Indeed, he is truly called one versed in the Dharma. No other refuge than the wake. Refuge supreme is there for me. Oh, by the virtue of this truth, may grace abound in victory. No other refuge than the truth. Refuge supreme is there for me. Oh, by the virtue of this truth, may grace abound in victory. No other refuge but the fellowship. Refuge supreme is there for me. Oh, by the virtue of this truth, may grace abound in victory. Homage to the Buddha. Homage to the Dharma. Homage to the Sangha. In Pali, I'll sit as if I was in meditation, as if I was in meditation, since this is a ritual. Dhammapalam Gati. Sabha papasa akarana usalasa upasampada sachikar Pariyodam Paman Etam Bhuttanam Sasanam Dhammam Chare Sucharitam Nam Tam Dutaritam Chare Dhammachari Sukham Siti Asmim Loke Paramicha Natavata Damadaro Yavata Bahupasati Yochapam Pitsutvana Dhammam Kayena Pasati Saved Amadaro Otiyo Napama Pamajati Nati me sarananyam Buddho me saranam varam Epena satyavachena Utu me jaya mangalam Nati me sarananyam Dharmo me saranam varam Vipena Satyavatena Utpume Jaya Mangalam Nati me Sarananyam Sankho me Saranam Varam Vipena Satyavatena Utpume Jaya Mangalam Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya Sadhu Sadhu